Welcome to Rose Unplugged, and today we're talking to Dr. Cyril Wecht. Dr. Wecht, I've known you for a long time, and you know I have a secret crush on you, although it's not so secret anymore. But I just admire you so much, and I think it's interesting. Well, first of all, you had a wonderful piece on the front page of the Post-Gazette over the weekend, and it was very thoughtful, very considerate. I know that you chose your words very carefully, but it was a powerful piece that you had in the Post-Gazette. One
Well,
of the
thank you.
things,
You know, there had been an op-ed piece back on Thursday, and then the article in the Post-Gazette yesterday was a follow-up that the Post-Gazette editor had suggested.
yes, and it was really very well written. And I have to say,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome. You and I were together. If you remember, we did a live broadcast in Pittsburgh from the home show.
From
And
the
this
home
is
at the convention center, I remember it well.
and it was just the beginning of the pandemic. And we discussed COVID-19 at great length on that program. I'm pretty sure that you would say that nothing has changed in your opinion. I mean, we were talking about the drastic measures that people were talking about but hadn't yet implemented. Let's talk about those measures right now. We are still seeing, Dr. Wecht, I just saw a father outside with two young boys in the beautiful weather. Both the children were wearing a mask. The father was wearing a mask. They were outside. It almost seems that we've gone a little too far in protecting ourselves and our families.
Yes, absolutely. I witness this every day as we drive in from our home in Squirrel Hill to the downtown office, and we go through a part of Shelly Park by the golf course. And I would like to have $100 bill for every person that I see walking with a mask by themselves, or sometimes an apparent couple or two friends, male or female, 6 feet or more apart. You could hear them conversing or see them, and they got masks on. And Rose, I'm amazed, I'm appalled at the, I don't mean to be insulting, but the scientific ignorance that has been catalyzed by the mass hysteria and panic associated with this. The coronavirus is not out there in the air. You'll get it if you are in contact with someone that has it and they cough or spit and droplets, fomites come out of their mouth. Yes, they can transmit it to you. You could get it from a contaminated surface. It lasts for some hours with fabric. It lasts a little bit longer with a hard metallic surface. Yes, that's the way you get it. You do not get it by walking outside. I can't tell you how many people have told the kind of story you just referred to that are amazed at big open fields, walking a dog, just taking a walk or so on. And then sometimes I notice when I've heard stories from them about the people who have the mask, and if they're walking and they see someone who doesn't have a mask, some of them will verbally assault the unmasked individual, or certainly give them a very evil look. It's unfathomable, absolutely.
You know, it's interesting too, because I was just in Florida and I noticed that the level of paranoia and fear is pretty much related to the leadership that you have. For example, in Florida, people weren't jumping away if you didn't have a mask on. Some wore the mask, mostly the elderly, others did not. Restaurants were beginning to open up when I was there, and now we understand that hair salons and nail salons and so forth are also opening up. Here in Pennsylvania, the paranoia is much higher, the level is higher, and I think it's because of the leadership. I mean, look, Dr. Wecht, they asked us to give them 2 weeks, and we gladly gave them 2 weeks. Then it became 4 weeks. Now we're looking at 10 weeks for many places in this country. This is the first time in history, correct me if I'm wrong, that healthy people have been quarantined.
Yes, I agree with you completely. And it is the unevenness, it is the asymmetry too, from one state to another, forgetting other countries in the world where there are significant differences too. But let's just stick with the United States of America. And this too is not good. It's not the kind of democracy that we live in. And why should there be these kinds of variations of a very significant degree? The The situation in Pennsylvania is, to my knowledge, one of the most restrictive in terms of overall states. It varies. There are some cities where they come on strong, like Los Angeles, but from a statewide perspective, Pennsylvania is one of the most uptight. And the cancellations of all kinds of events, including universities that are scheduled to open with courses beginning in late August, the continuing shutdown of churches and synagogues and mosques, the continuing impositions on people in all facets of their life, the continuing unemployment and people with no money, people sitting in a car for hours at an airport parking lot or going through some other walking line to get a little bit of food. How many days a week are they supposed to do that? How many people are there out of jobs, many of which will never be retrievable? How many people who saved up for years to start a small business that it closed down, that will not reopen? No, it is unbelievable. Governor Wolf, and I am a Democrat, as you know.
Yes.
I have supported him, and I do think he's been doing a good job. However, I think he's an intelligent man, and he was a very successful businessman. I do not believe he has any medical or scientific background. I can only surmise, and obviously it's the only inference that one can take away, is that he's getting this advice from his Secretary of Health, Dr. Rachel Levine, and he is espousing what he is being told by her and maybe some others. That's where it must be coming from, because we see a continuing loosening up around the country in various ways. And if you just read the articles, as I do every day, and more so in the Wall Street Journal and so on, you see that this is what should be happening.
I agree. The thing that concerns me, though, is that no amount of pleas or any lawsuits or strongly worded letters to the governor have actually made a difference. And it's very concerning. And I share your concern for the small businessman and woman. So many of our small businesses are owned, they are mom and pop establishments. And it means simply that both the husband and wife are deriving 100% of their income from that business. And they've not been getting the money. They still have their fixed costs. And this is, a lot of people have told me already, we don't think we'll ever reopen. We just can't do it. Too long now.
Yes, it's just not good. Lives are being destroyed. And of course, the people who have this kind of highly restrictive approach, they keep talking about we have to protect the living. Yes, you and I, as sensitive, educated, intelligent human beings, we want to protect the living too. And we have to focus our attention then on the disabled, the elderly, people with chronic serious disease processes, obese, diabetics, and so on. Yes, and also people have a right to do what they want individually. You want to wear a mask? I go, okay, fine, then wear the mask. You want to stay sequestered in your home and not see your children who live elsewhere, or not to go and visit your dying mother or father in a hospital or so on? Okay, fine. I'm not going to force you to do that. But do not come on in such an arrogant fashion that you are out to protect the living, and the people like you and me talking in the fashion that we are, that we don't give a damn about the living. I don't want to hear that from them, because I'm concerned, yes, about the living of the lives of all the people who are subjected to these kinds of restrictions, from little children, 1 of 5 in America going to bed hungry every night, from people losing their jobs with no income, people going psychotic and neurotic, people committing suicide, have an increased number of drug deaths we have noted in the last few weeks, and so on. What do these other people think? They are mindless. Somehow they've latched onto this. They alone want to protect the living. and if you just loosen up things a little bit, then you are insensitive and uncaring, and you have no sense of humanitarianism. That to me is terrible. And a statement that the governor made last week, calling people like you and me who call for restrictions and so on, he said that people like that are cowards, that we don't want to do battle. He analogized this to a military type situation. We are physical cowards. We are afraid to do battle with the enemy.
Yes, that was so offensive. That was so very offensive. You
Yes.
know, I have to note, there was a story that came out today that a neurosurgeon is saying that the face masks that people are wearing now pose a serious risk to healthy people. Would you agree with that?
A serious risk to what kind of people?
Healthy.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when I don't even like the idea of it. I was in Lowe's the other day and everyone's walking around with their face covered, and it was disturbing to me, very disturbing. I want to talk about a couple of things that we have discovered over the last couple of weeks. In fact, tragically, Dr. Wecht, we have had over 4,000 deaths in Pennsylvania. However, if you break that number down, it turns out that 4.7% of those deaths had 5 or more comorbidities. 10.9% had 4. And then it just keeps on going down to 22% had 3, 28.3% had 2 comorbidities, and 24.1% had at least 1. So could you comment on that, please?
Yes, indeed. A lot of these people have significant comorbidities, and ironically and paradoxically, and quite terribly, by the way, some of these people in certain nursing homes and hospices and so on are not getting the kind of care that they should in these badly needed final months of their lives, because all this attention is being diverted. With regard to the morbidity and mortality of COVID-19, the coronavirus, and more than 90% of people who become infected include about maybe as much as 50%, at least a half or more of that 90% plus, who don't even know that they have been infected. They have no knowledge that they have been infected by COVID. And then the remaining portion of that 90% plus have an affliction, a troublesome problem of 2 to 3 days, like my grandson. A couple of months ago, when he came back from a Georgetown University program in Madrid, Spain, and quickly found out after he had a cough that he was presumptively positive. And by the time the test came back the next day, he was feeling better. And 1 day later, he was back to normal. Wow. That is typical. So of the remaining less than 10%, there are only about a small percentage that require serious medical attention and hospitalization. And the mortality rate, and there's a study that just was published yesterday from Stanford University Group, Stanford University, that shows something that I have reflected upon many times: the mortality rate that can be directly scientifically attributed to COVID-19 is 0.1 to 0.5%, 0.1 to 0.5%. In the 2018-2019 flu season, 61,000 Americans died. Yes, that's less than the 100,000 who have died, we're told. How correct that is, but it's not an insignificant number. And what did we do? What did we do, Rose? And I go back to my early days as a student, medical student, and then as a resident at the University VA Hospital, doing autopsies. Polio, tuberculosis, several influenza epidemics, HIV, AIDS, Zika, and Ebola, and then SARS and MERS. We didn't close down civilization. We dealt with it, and that's what needs to be done now. So while we care indeed about the living, if those elderly, disabled, chronically ill people get extra care, extra attention, and take care of themselves with input from their family, if you go to the rest of the population, you're dealing with something that is just not. You have to put it on the scale. I picture the goddess of justice with the blindfold, and she's got the two scales. So on the one side, you put down the morbidity and the mortality, and on the other side, you put down all the things we've talked about, that people don't have food to eat, people can't go to school, people can't see their families, including their dying relatives, people can't go to see their priest, minister, rabbi, and omen, people who need comfort and solace at this time can't go into their churches and synagogues and mosques and so on. Put that on the other side of the scale, and then see what you come up with. And one more thing too, the unevenness from a socioeconomic standpoint. People, when they talk about, well, the majority of Americans are in favor of this restriction, go to the people that had jobs for which they were being paid less than $15 an hour, hand to mouth, okay? Let's do the polling among them and find out. They're a little different from the politicians who are collecting their full salaries, sitting in their offices, and coming out with these incredibly stringent rules and restrictions. Let's take a vote among the people that are hurting. Ask them, sir, madam, here's the mortality rate. These are the figures. We want you to make a decision. Tell us how you vote. Tell us what you want to do. Do you want to go out and go back to work and run the risk of a possible COVID infection? And if you get the infection, then there's a chance of less than 1% that you may die, as opposed to going back and earning a living and seeing your family and so on. How do you think that vote would come out?
Well, very good question. And I think I do know how that vote would turn out. And, it comes down to assessing our own risk, doesn't it? Life is not without risk.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it comes really down to that at this point.
Yes, it is. We have risk, and people do things all the time, including driving an automobile, flying in an airplane, and not to mention people who take long swims and people that climb mountains and life. And as far as risk are concerned, we take risk all the time when we're in the presence of someone who is ill, or et cetera. And now, Rose, what really is further disturbing was an article, I think, in one of my papers today. They're talking about, I think it was Fauci who said that we should eliminate the handshake forever. Nobody should ever shake hands anymore. I mean, how disgusting is that? This has been around for thousands of years. It has a meaning, a significance, a hand of friendship, a hand without a weapon. To come off like that and have the audacity to tell people that you shouldn't shake hands, that you won't be able to see when I see you on the street, and as we've been together, to hug and embrace you and kiss you on the cheek and so on. I mean, friends and close friends who were both Mediterranean, that's the way we live, right? I mean, this is incredible. Absolutely incomprehensible.
It is, and it makes me sad. I'm saddened to see that I don't like this social distancing. And again, we were told initially that this was only for 2 weeks, mostly because we wanted to keep the numbers down, the number of beds taken in hospitals. Well, now we find out that a very low number of beds were occupied in hospitals. And so what is the real story? The story keeps evolving over time. And I don't like that. And I don't like that we are afraid to go near each other. This has got to end. But Dr. Wecht, I am very concerned. And let's talk about vaccines for just a moment, if you don't mind. There's talk about a vaccine, and the concern that I have is that it could become mandated. And I don't want anyone telling me that I have to take a virus vaccine. I just don't want it. I understand polio. I understand a lot of them. But this, I will not understand and cannot understand. Do you believe that it should be mandated?
Well, we'll see what the story is in terms of the worldwide pandemic and so on. And that is another matter. Indeed, I'm aware of the people who feel that way about vaccines and whether they should be mandated or not. I'm aware. I want to get back to a point you were making on the medical side in hospitals.
Sure.
You know that hospitals now are hurting too because people don't want to go to the hospital. 2 of my kids are doctors, and a lot of patients are not showing up. They're not getting medical attention. And the idea that existed for some time that only people who needed elective surgery or only people with mild transient illnesses doesn't work that way. Why do we do biopsies all the time that pathologists study under the microscope to see whether it's malignant or not? So don't tell me what is elective. Don't tell me about the early stage of cardiovascular, hepatic, or renal disease that can be thought as something of a transient nature. It may be a serious element. And then how about on the legal side? What do you think's going on? All the people that are seeking justice that can't go into court, whether it's obtaining a divorce, whether it's child abuse, whether it's malpractice, whether it's personal injury, whether it's homicide case. What about all of that? No justice system in America either, closed down for how long? So how long is this going to go on? You cannot destroy civilization. This is unsustainable. Anybody that doesn't understand that, really, I have a problem in comprehending their intellectual ability.
Okay, well, that brings me to our last and final point, because our governor is the one who is making these decisions, whether they are based on Dr. Levin's recommendations or not. He is the final word on all of this. And I don't understand how he doesn't understand that this is destroying our state, our health, our welfare, and our economy in this state.
One more point, too. Well, look at this. The head of the Pennsylvania State Police said that he's not going to have his state police go into jurisdictions where there are local law enforcement agencies. He's not going to have the state police going around giving citations and fines and so on. So here you have, and I agree with him fully, but at the same time, you can't have a situation in which the head of the state police, is saying something that is different from you understand what I'm talking about in terms of how democracy works. So I agree, and I laud him for what he said. But I'm just saying that this shows you the kind of tumultuous situation we have created.
And it can be fixed easily. It can be fixed easily.
Yes.
Allow us to open up. And listen, Dr. Wecht, in Florida, they did it very thoughtfully.
Yes.
And they're doing it safely. I'm not even sure all the measures they're taking are absolutely necessary, but you know what? If that's what it means to be able to reopen again and open for business, then okay, let's do it.
You can deal with it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wecht.
It was a pleasure to be with you as always, and I can't wait till the next time we're together and we'll talk about this and we'll sneak in a cheek kiss too.
Oh, okay? Yeah, we will. Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Rose.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.